welcome. We are very, very happy to see you here tonight. We always think of September as kind of our kickoff. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Linda Hamilton. I'm the Executive Director of Accelerate Neighborhood Climate Action, otherwise known as ANCA Redlands. So before we begin, I'd like to have you just turn to somebody that maybe you don't know, maybe you have to turn around or something like that to find somebody you don't know, not the person you came with, and just introduce yourself and tell them what drew you here tonight. And you've got 30 seconds each. Climate people really need to know each other, right? It's important. So for those of you, how many here are here for the first time tonight?
Nice and important.
Oh, wow. All right. Yeah. So just a few words about who ANCA is. First of all, we're a nonprofit 501c3 organization. We're about a little over 2.5 years old, and we are committed to building climate-resilient communities, neighborhood by neighborhood. So tonight, rather than tell you about our programs and stuff, I thought I'd just share our brand new vision statement with you, because I think that kind of holds the feel of ANCA and the essence of who we are. So this is how we're going to do it. It's kind of long, so it's 3 sentences. So I'm going to ask you this side of the room to read the first sentence, this side of the room read the second sentence, and then all together we'll read the third sentence, okay? All right, so on the count of 3, go. 1, 2, 3.
Our vision is to create a network of climate-resilient communities across the Inland Empire, where every neighborhood is empowered with the knowledge, resources, and collaborative spirit needed to tackle climate challenges. We envision a future where sustainable living practices are the norm, waste is minimized, and communities are prepared for climate-related disasters. By fostering education, action, and collective engagement, we aim to inspire a region-wide movement that not only mitigates the impacts of climate change, but also promotes environmental justice and enhances the quality of life for all residents.
What's a sentence or a phrase that you were really happy to see in that vision?
Being prepared.
Being prepared. Anybody else?
Promoting environmental justice.
Environmental justice, yes. Okay, all right. So we just adopted this, and I'm excited about it. I think it really inspires me every day to do the work I'm doing. So, the intent of this series that you're attending tonight, especially for those of you who are new, it's called Resilient Living, Facing Climate Challenges Together. And it's really, we're doing this to encourage all of us to get better informed about climate change. Did anybody see the LA Times this week? Big section full of it's all about climate change. So I think they're putting the word out, this is really serious, we need to pay attention to this. So what we focus on here, we have 3 goals for ANCA. One is to reduce carbon emissions. The second is to prepare for more severe impacts of climate change. And the third is to ensure environmental justice in everything that we do. Those are our 3 main goals. And what guides us is our vision of what a climate resilient community could actually look like. This gives everybody at every level in our community something to work on. So I'm going to ask Aaron. I think I can do this myself. Let's see. Uh-oh. Aaron, where are you? Which one do I push? Oh, okay. The word jumped out of it. Okay. So this is our vision. You can see our 3 goals are up there, and each one of these green boxes has one element that needs to be present in a climate resilient community. So you take a look at that, and every session that we do here once a month addresses one of these elements. So tonight, I think the one that we're hitting the most is the low carbon transportation system, but in some ways it's kind of about all of it. So we're very excited to be doing this. And transportation, we also, let's see, no, we have housing, yeah, electrification, yeah. Okay, anyway, so just yesterday, I was reading an article, it just popped up in the Guardian, if any of you read the Guardian, and it was about how Europe beats the US for walkable, livable cities. How many of you knew that? Pretty obvious as you've been there, right? And some cities there actually have key services available within 15 minutes, I'm sorry, for more than 95% of the residents. Isn't that incredible? Yeah. And I think, isn't that one of the reasons we love Europe? Is just how they live? Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of a segue into our topic for tonight, which is living denser, moving smarter. And I'm so delighted to be able to introduce our speakers for tonight because I know them both fairly well. And the first speaker, I think most of you probably know, is Denise Davis, who is a Redlands City Council member from District 1. Okay? She's my rep, I'm proud to say that. She's known as a trailblazer, a supporter of small businesses, an initiator of Redlands' first ever utility assistance program, and she has an overall track record for producing results. And she's a new mother. So we're very happy to have you, Denise. Our second speaker is kind of new in town, but he is rapidly becoming known for his passion for the issue of housing in relation to climate change. How many of you have heard of YIMBY? Oh my gosh, Bobby, you've done your job. Incredible. I'll bet you heard him speak at a city council meeting because he's there almost every time. And so one of the first times that I met Bobby, I asked him what he did, and he said, my job is in financial management, but that's just the way I make money. This is my real job, YIMBY, climate change. Yeah, I love that. So I think it's time now to bring Bobby up here and ask the audience to please hold questions until the end. We're going to have ample time tonight for Q&A, okay?
All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Living Closer, Moving Smarter, where we are going to talk about the intersection between housing policy and climate policy. What do our land use decisions have to do with our carbon emissions? My name is Bobby Garrity, and I lead the organization Redlands YIMBY, that is Yes in My Backyard. We are trying to solve the housing crisis by making housing less expensive by making it easier and less expensive to build in Redlands, the IE, and all across California.
I might need to use the mic. Hello, everyone. I'm Denise Davis. I'm a city council member in the middle of my second term, so I've been on the council for about 6 years at this point. One of my proudest achievements so far is that I've created our first ever Climate Policy Council, and Bobby and Linda and members from ANCA are a part of it, members from the University of Redlands. And one of our big victories so far is that Linda noticed that the city was giving rebates for synthetic turf, and she said, wait a minute, that's not a good thing to reward people for. Synthetic turf is actually quite bad for the environment. And so we brought it to the city council, we had a thorough discussion about it, we read some great articles, and our city council voted to remove that as a rebate item and to really just prioritize people who are doing native plants in their gardens. And so that's just one example of the many things I hope the Climate Policy Council is able to accomplish. We're looking at a ban on single-use plastics, which I know will be a heavy lift in the city of Redlands, but we're doing some dedicated research and strategizing, and stay tuned for updates in the future. But I'm so thrilled to be here with you all tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, so we're going to start off with a quiz. So I want you to imagine two people, John and Mary. They grew up in pretty much the same circumstances. They both went away to college, got a job, and then the only difference is that they chose two very different places to live. Mary chose to live in a town called Oshkosh, Nebraska. And if you never heard of it, it's an extremely small town, kind of in the middle of nowhere. She is surrounded by fields, farms, lots of green everywhere she looks, and she's got solar panels on her house. Whereas John did the exact opposite. He moved to none other than the island of Manhattan, where he lives in a super tall skyscraper, is surrounded by steel and concrete, and it's a special day if he sees a tree. I want you to tell me, raise your hand, who do you think has lower carbon emissions? How many of you think it's Mary? And how many of you think it's John? Okay, most of you got it right. And the primary, really the only difference between these two places is the density. Density is one of the strongest correlates with carbon emissions. And we see this everywhere, not just at the extremes. The New York Times put together an incredible map where they mapped out everyone's per capita emissions down to the neighborhood level. And there's a very clear trend. In the middle of the city, so green obviously is lower, red is higher. In the middle of the city is where emissions are the lowest. And as you move outward, they become much higher. We see this in the Bay Area, where San Francisco and Oakland are the lowest. As you go out to the exurban suburbs, they're higher. And of course, we see it in SoCal too, where the lowest per capita emissions are in downtown LA, and as you move outwards, they get higher. You'll see Redlands is about average. So why is this? The fundamental reason why this is the case is because that density is inherently efficient. You can think of all environmental problems as resource consumption problems. You're either consuming too much of something or emitting too much of a certain kind of waste. So to deal with any of those problems, you do one of two things. You can either reduce consumption and make sacrifices for the sake of the environment, or you can produce the things you want more efficiently. Density is one of the opportunities for us to do that. And that's for three main reasons. One is that density is more efficient on the transportation side, because you do less driving. We'll talk about why in a moment. It's also more energy efficient on the building side. That's because of the different building types from higher density typologies. And it's also more efficient from the land use perspective. Whereas increasing the amount of infill housing you build, and infill is when you build on already urbanized land, reduces the amount of exurban sprawl you need, the amount of fields you need to develop over, and forests you need to cut down, deserts you need to pave over, and all that. So we're going to talk about all three of these tonight, but the first one we're going to talk about is the transportation efficiency. Because for the US, and even more so for California, that is the largest sector of where our emissions come from. And for Redlands, it's even more so. So the city is right now going through its climate action plan. You'll hear more about that later. But this came from the consultant's preliminary report, the existing status quo of Redlands emission counts, where it's coming from. And they found that not only is transportation the largest source of emissions, not only is it the majority of our emissions, it's 2/3. 2/3 of our emissions come from transportation. So reducing that needs to be our top priority if we want to reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. So how does density help with this? When you increase density, there's, within a given distance to you, there's not only more people, but there's also more stores, more jobs, doctor's offices, everything else. Everything you go to is closer to you. And so that means that you have more opportunities to walk to places instead of driving, more opportunities to bike places instead of driving. And if you do have to drive somewhere, you won't have to drive as far. So, because of all these things, density greatly reduces the amount of emissions needed to get to where you need to be. And just to emphasize how strong this connection is, take a look at this chart. Here you see population density mapped against energy use per capita. The y-axis is energy use, the x-axis is population density, and you see here there is an exponential relationship between the two. And I want to emphasize this because the great thing about an exponential relationship is you can get most of the benefit from only a little bit of the work. You don't have to become Hong Kong to get most of the energy savings. You could be as low density as, say, Paris, or many European cities. And this really matters at the local level. The Cool Climate Network from UC Berkeley did a study to find the amount of emissions that could be saved from each kind of intervention, specifically those at the local level. Notice, urban infill is the #1 possible source of emission savings. And that's even with VMT reduction being listed as a separate category, right above there. VMT stands for vehicle miles traveled. That is the total amount of distance driven by all vehicles all the time. So those two things combined are the emission savings we can get from embracing more density. So we've established that density is an amazing thing for the climate. So we should have more of it, right? There's a problem though. Our local policies actually inhibit density. At the local level, Redlands, just like many cities, has outright density limits. You can only build a certain number of units per acre, and there's a number of other restrictions we'll talk about in a moment. But you're probably wondering why. Why, if density is so good, would we want to limit the amount of density we have in our cities? Well, the answer is frankly just inertia. It's the holdovers from prior decades. Most of the anti-density policies in our city were passed in the 1950s through the 1980s. Which makes sense, because back then, land was very cheap in the Inland Empire. We certainly weren't dealing with a housing crisis. And climate change, though it was happening, very few people knew about it. So you can understand why the people back then wanted to limit the amount of density. Why not give us all a little more space? But we've learned a lot since then, and the world has changed. So what are some of those policy barriers that limit density? Well, we talked about the outright limits, but there's also other kinds of land use limits that may limit the amount you can practically build on a given amount of space. There's things like setback requirements, say you have to be a certain amount of distance from the street, and other properties. Things like lot coverage ratios that say you can only use a certain portion of it. We also have zoning designations and segregation of uses. In most of the city, you aren't even allowed to build anything other than a detached single-family home. And we also segregate the city into different zones. You have a residential zone over here and you have a commercial zone over there. That also increases emissions because you have to drive from your home in the residential zone to the places you go in the commercial zone. Allowing mixed-use development will help reduce those travels as well. And then we have what may be the most environmentally destructive policy that we still have, and that's minimum off-street parking mandates. This is a policy that says if you want to build anything, whether it's housing, any sort of commercial building, or really anything else, you have to provide a minimum amount of parking. You can have however much more, but you can't have any less. And so that's why so much of our city looks like this. And this is really upsetting because a parking lot is quite possibly the worst thing you could build for the environment. Asphalt destroys all of the natural habitat that was over there. It prevents permeability for water. And most impactful of all, it induces driving. Professor Donald Chu, who is a UCLA planning professor, generally considered the professor on parking. When he came to Redlands last year, he said a quote that stuck with me ever since. He said, "Parking is a fertility drug for cars." And so by creating so much more of it, we have so much more driving than we would otherwise. The free market will provide plenty of car parking. We don't need to force people to build even more. So to talk about So these are some of the policy changes that we need to tackle in order to shift the paradigm to a more environmentally friendly. To move away from the status quo in the Inland Empire of car-centric exurban sprawl to what we call transit-oriented development and more infill housing. And this is also really important because you need density to bring about the viability of transit. What does that mean? So transit needs a certain number of people who live close enough to the stops to make that system work. Because it depends on the riders for two things. One is the fare revenue. If not enough people are paying for tickets because they're not riding it, then that line doesn't make enough money. And having more transit riders also gives transit a political constituency to help protect government subsidy and other policies that make transit possible. And so we need there to be enough people to ride the transit we build, to keep it running, keep it viable, and ultimately expand. And so now to talk about what we're doing on the transit side of local level, I will now pass it off to Denise to talk about some of our initiatives there.
Thanks so much, Bobby. I should say that I have lived in Redlands for over 20 years, and I took a brief hiatus to do my master's degree in London, where I did not have a car and relied solely on public transportation. We have a great bus system, a great tube system, the subway. But it's really, as you know, it's part of the culture there more so than it's the culture here. And I think that what we need to do is work on slowly changing the culture in Redlands. How many years have we been hearing prior to the train coming online? Oh, we need a train, right? We can't wait to get a train in Redlands. Well, now we have the Aero line, which is incredible, but as you might imagine, as you see the train going by, the ridership numbers are not exactly what we anticipated. And again, that's part of the culture. We just need to get people comfortable with riding the train. And you may have seen recently we had an event to celebrate. Actually, this is a historic train, the first ever zero-emission train of its type. There's a long title that's on my Instagram that I don't fully remember at this point, but The first ever zero emission train is here, going from Redlands to San Bernardino, which is huge. And I hope that people ride it once it's available. They're doing testing at this point. But yeah, I hope that that's more of an incentive, especially for this crowd who I know cares very deeply about the environment, to actually take advantage of this great transit that we have available to us in the Arrow line and then the link to the Metrolink, of course. Beyond that, I am the City of Redlands representative for Omnitrans, which is our San Bernardino County bus service. So each of the cities in the region, plus the county supervisors, designates one rep to sit on the board. We have monthly board meetings in San Bernardino at the Omnitrans headquarters. And I have to say that Redlands ridership has dipped post-pandemic. I think that's been the case for a lot of cities, and which is kind of dangerous because when ridership dips, then they start thinking about taking lines away. We currently have 3 bus lines that run through the city of Redlands, which connects you to all the other cities in the county, or at least a lot of the major cities close by in our region. So that's something that we really need to keep in mind too, is we need more ridership on the bus, and we need more ridership on the train to keep these as viable options to alternative transportation that's cleaner. Something else that I have proposed on the city council is looking at the Anaheim model of FRAN, free rides around the neighborhood. There, as you might know, there's a lot of conversation in Redlands about whether or not we have too much parking or not enough parking. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle, depending on the day. But my environmentally friendly solution was to propose that we examine programs such as FRAN and how they can be fruitful in the city of Redlands. So the city council voted unanimously to move forward with this project. And right now it's with city staff, and they're doing the research to see what type of electric shuttle system would work most efficiently for our downtown. And with local government, you probably know this, things move slower than most of us would like. But I'm hopeful to see this come on board at least in the next couple of years. And I'm hoping either by the end of this year or early next year, we'll see more discussion about it on our council agenda. So stay tuned for more details of an electric shuttle coming to our downtown.
Thank you, Denise. All right. All right, so we just talked about the largest energy use in most households, and that is driving. The second largest energy use in a typical household is HVAC, heating and air conditioning. And this is where density helps as well, because of the different kinds of buildings that you get when you increase density. Well, here's why. So imagine going from detached single-family homes to attached row houses or townhomes. They're fundamentally the same thing. They're both single-family homes. The only difference is that row houses and townhomes don't have space in between on the sides. They're attached. This helps reduce emissions because the amount of energy that a home has to use is proportional to the amount of exposed surface area on the outside of the building. So when you have a detached single-family home, all of the walls are exposed to the air. So you lose heat on all sides in the winter, and heat comes in on all sides in the summer. Whereas with attached row houses or townhomes, your neighbors provide insulation for you because the sides of the home are not exposed. There's another house there. So you get tremendous energy savings by building row houses and townhomes. And besides the energy savings, this is also great because these are some of the most naturally affordable types of housing, particularly if you want to increase home ownership opportunities too. So this is wonderful. Why don't we have more of them? Well, the answer is because of a policy that I think I mentioned earlier called setback mandates. So in Redlands, like in most cities in California, there's a policy that says you need to keep the house a certain amount of distance from the property line. And because of that, there's no law that says, oh, you can't build row houses, but it's effectively illegal unless you get a variance. So this is an example of a policy we need to change to get something that people want, there's demand for, and that's also better for the climate. And the great thing about this process of seeing energy savings and emission reductions by increasing in density, it happens at every level. So now imagine we go from row houses to apartments. The same concept applies here, but now instead of just sharing sidewalls with your neighbors and getting insulation from them, you're now also doing so for the floors and ceilings. So for the exact same reason, you get even more energy savings, even more emission reductions as you continue to increase density. But likewise, here we also have a policy barrier. Because of zoning designations, it is illegal to build apartments in the vast majority of the city. Most of the residential land we have zoned is only for detached single-family homes. So even though we're in the midst of a housing crisis and a climate crisis, the solution is illegal. So this is an example of some of the policy reforms we need to make and are working on now to reduce emissions. And I'd also like to make one other point. When we make it harder to build more housing, there's less new housing that comes on the market. Because obviously, anytime you build housing, it is new. You can't build old housing. And that means that old housing has to stick around for longer. This is a problem for the climate because compared to old housing, new housing has better insulation, it has more efficient appliances, and they're more likely to have electric heating and so compared to gas. So we really do see some tremendous savings when we allow more new housing to be built and hopefully get to the point where we can start to replace some of the old housing. So what are some of the policy barriers we need to make to see this through? So first off, we have to increase the allowable densities. If it is illegal to build more than a certain number of units on an acre, well, you're not going to get more than that. We also need to reform the land use decision. We talked about setbacks. Side setbacks should be eliminated so that row houses and townhomes are effectively legal. And we also have room to reduce front setbacks. There's also things we can do on the building code side. There's a number of policy changes that we can make to allow more naturally efficient and naturally affordable housing types to be built. Linda opened by talking a bit about Europe. A lot of the great buildings you see in Europe are illegal here because of building codes. And then, of course, we talked about minimum off-street parking mandates. That's easy, low-hanging fruit, in my view. So that's certainly something that we should seek to remove. And so making these policy changes allows us to get what we call missing middle housing. It's called missing middle because it is the mid-densities in between single-family homes and multi-story apartments. There's things like duplexes, townhomes, triplexes, and so on. And these are really a sweet spot, and that's why it's called middle. It's called missing because in the US, many policy barriers exist to seeing these be built. That's why you don't see as many of them here than you do in other countries. And what's great about missing middle is that it is both naturally efficient on both the energy side, for all the reasons we talked about, and the economic side. These are naturally affordable types of housing to build because they use the land fairly efficiently, but they don't incur the higher costs you get when you have to build multiple stories. So next I will pass it off to Denise to talk about some of our energy initiatives.
So this slide might be a little bit premature because we're so early in these conversations, but I wanted to give you a preview of something else that our Climate Policy Council is working on. We are having a meeting next month with the city manager to talk about community choice energy. And this is for a few reasons. We've been working with experts from the University of Redlands who do a lot of research in this area. And it's obviously, it's a cleaner way to go, but it would involve the city acting as the entity that purchases the electrical power on behalf of the residents, which would in theory be great. And I think in the past there's been some concerns about cost, but we're living in a moment right now. I don't know if you're seeing this, but my energy bill has skyrocketed, my Edison bill. And so I raised this also as a concern to the city manager, that this is really a hardship for a lot of us in our community. And so there are a lot of different reasons now to consider community choice energy and to see if this is not only a clean, but a financially viable alternative. So I just wanted to share with you that this is something that we are discussing, and I'm hoping it's something that can make it onto our council agenda very soon. And if you are experts in this or have thoughts, let's talk afterwards, or feel free to email me, because I'm trying to collect as much information as I can right now. So I would appreciate that.
Great. So next, I want to talk about the benefit to density in terms of land use. So the more density you allow, the less sprawl you have. The reason this happens is because if cities make it too hard to build housing in their already urbanized areas, well, all those people who would have moved there have to go somewhere else. So where do they go when everyone in the region makes it too hard to build housing in the city centers? They go to the exurbs. They drive even more sprawl, which means that there's more habitat degradation. More land has to be consumed for housing and commercial developments and everything else, because we made it too difficult and expensive to build infill housing on already urbanized land. This is really important because that drives more biodiversity loss. Biodiversity is central to the health of the planet, and losing that can really trigger some very dangerous cycles. We don't really even know what that could bring. That also causes us to lose forest cover. And that's concerning because forest cover contains a lot of embedded carbon. So chopping down forests to continue sprawling outward has the immediate emissions increase from the loss of trees and brush, as well as all of the emissions increases that come from driving in that type of built environment. And an easy way to illustrate this is to imagine an island where you could do one of two things. You could chop down every tree on the island to build 100 detached single-family homes, or you can use only 4% of the island to build some apartments and have 96% of the land still preserved for nature. Obviously, these are two ends of the extremes, but it illustrates the point that the more density that we allow where we do build, the more land that we can save for nature. So next I'll pass it off to Denise to talk about some of our downtown initiatives.
This is one of my favorite subjects. When I was running for council initially in 2018, do you remember that there was a whole series of community meetings to talk about the transit village concepts? And for me, that was one of my main motivations in wanting to get involved in shaping Redlands. Because I think that the future of Redlands should be a future that includes mixed-use, walkable transit villages. And so in November of 2022, we finally did approve the transit village specific plan. And we have approved 3 different development projects in the downtown plan so far. So you might have heard about the mall redevelopment project. It's called State Street Village. It will be, that's actually a picture of it right there. It's going to be absolutely gorgeous. If this actually comes to fruition, hopefully it will. This is the project I'm probably most excited about going forward. So it's a mixed-use development consisting of over 700 residential units and first floor retail development. So exactly what Bobby was talking about before. People aren't going to have to get in their cars if they live there. They're going to have access to downtown, but also retail and restaurant opportunities right where they live, which will be a game changer for Redlands. It was supposed to break ground this year. They've run into some financial hurdles, unfortunately, as a lot of developers have, with the market and inflation being what it is. We're hoping that they break ground next year, but at this point, They have all of the approvals from City Council, they have the entitlements, the project is greenlit. We're just waiting for the money to come through and for the development to start. Beyond that, we approved 2 more projects in that same neighborhood. So City Center is a mixed-use project at the intersection of Eureka and Brookside, consisting of 90 residential units with commercial buildings on the street front, and also the Grand Apartments. This is a 150-unit apartment development at the northeast corner of Redlands Boulevard in Eureka. So all 3 of those projects have been approved by your City Council. We are just waiting for them to be built at this point. And then beyond that, other projects under construction or recently completed in the downtown transit village include the most beautiful parking structure I've ever seen. The downtown parking structure, and it has an adjacent retail office building at 31 West Stewart Street. And there's plenty of electric vehicle charging stations there. So that's a great asset to our downtown. I've heard from people who don't live in Redlands but stop in Redlands specifically to charge their vehicles at that parking lot, so that's great. Beyond that, we have the Redlands Public Market, which is an exciting concept. If you've been to the Riverside Food Lab, it's the same developers and the same sort of concept. Right down there by the movie theater downtown. And then beyond that, we have 2 other train stations, one at Esri and one at the University of Redlands. The University of Redlands has selected a developer to work on mixed-use developments, including retail, residential, lodging, and entertainment uses on that land near the university. And the Esri Transit Village is still very much in conversation and development. So I really hope that within our lifetimes, we will see these transit villages come to fruition, because I think that it will really change Redlands for the future and for the better, and make it more environmentally friendly, more walkable, and just an overall more appealing city. So I'm quite thrilled about the transit village concept and our specific plan going forward.
So today's talk was entirely focused on the environmental benefits of density. But we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the other benefits that are just as important. There's a lot of economic benefits to density. I'm sure you all know, as Californians, we are in a housing crisis. So the only way to solve that is to build more homes. And since you only have so much land, the only way to do that is with more density. So more density is absolutely necessary to bring the cost of housing down, to make rents reasonable, and to make home ownership accessible. It also reduces people's transportation expense. We talked about the reduction in driving that comes from density and the reduction in emissions that comes from it. That's also a reduction in costs. If people are spending less on gas because they aren't driving as far, that's a fair amount of money to be saving every week. And if they can forego owning a car entirely, that is a lot of money that they save every month. It also reduces infrastructure costs. This is really important for local governments, because the amount of money that a city has to spend on its infrastructure is a function of the length. So the number of linear feet of infrastructure, whether it's roads, sewers, power lines, you name it, is a function of length. And when you increase density, you increase the number of people who live on adjacent to however many linear feet of infrastructure, which means there's more taxpayers for the same amount of infrastructure. So therefore, you could either have better infrastructure and better public services, or you could have the same level of infrastructure and public services for less taxes. And it also brings people closer to better jobs. The higher the density is, the more job opportunities are available to people within a given distance. So not only do people not have to drive as far to get to work, but there's the possibility that they may be able to get a better job for them than otherwise. There's also enormous health benefits. By reducing car dependence, there's more opportunities for people to walk and bike places. so they get a lot more exercise. Walking every day is incredible for your health. And I think we all know driving is pretty stressful and really bad for you. In part because it's isolating. And speaking of which, that brings us to our last benefit of density. And that's the fact that when there's more people in a given number of area, that means that within a certain distance, you have so many more of your friends close to you, so many more of your family members close to you, and that gives you so much more opportunities to see them more often. You know, increasing population density, by definition, literally means bringing people together. So that is a really underrated benefit of density that I hope you don't forget about. So, in closing, we hope everybody here, if you didn't know already, now understands the incredible benefits of density and how it's a central key to making our cities not just more sustainable, but also more vibrant, more healthy, and just better places to live. And to make a more general point on that, recall how I opened by talking about efficiency. We can solve the climate crisis by drastically reducing our standard of living, but nobody wants to do that. But thankfully, we don't have to. We could solve the climate crisis by embracing new ideas, new technologies, and new methods. And in doing so, we won't just solve the climate crisis, we won't just get carbon emissions down, but we'll make the world so much better than we ever thought possible before. So now I'll pass it off to Denise for some closing comments.
Thank you so much. I just wanted you to know that we're going through a revision of our climate action plan right now. The city has hired a consultant, and there will be community meetings coming up in October. So stay tuned. You can look at the city's website. You can follow my social media at Denise Davis for Redlands. On Instagram is where I'm most active. We'll be pushing out those meeting dates. There'll be a survey that people can take. They've already been working with some members of the community. I know some ANCA members have been very involved with the consultant thus far. So I'm really hopeful that with our new and improved climate action plan, the city will double down on our climate goals. And also I'm really happy to report that I've been pushing for the last few years for the city to hire our first ever sustainability coordinator, and I'm very happy to report that that position is now posted on our HR website. So if you know anyone, that's an open position, the inaugural sustainability coordinator. And just one more note on some of the things that we've been working on that are relevant. I know we talked a lot about housing in this presentation, and while we are bringing on higher density housing and apartments that are market rate, Councilmember Guzman Lowry is here in the audience, and I want to give her a shout out. She and I have been pushing for more affordable housing in Redlands, and the council understands that this is a priority for a lot of us in this community. And so like a year ago, we passed an inclusionary housing ordinance, and we're quite proud of this because we're really leading the region. I've been watching the Riverside Council meetings, and they haven't been able to do this yet. So we passed this ordinance, and so far, the developments that have been approved post-ordinance have included over $3 million in lieu fees. So that's $3 million going to an affordable housing fee that we will use, or fund that we will use in the future to build affordable housing. So the developers can either pay that fee or they can build affordable units. And we have to date 100 affordable units coming online as these development projects get built. So I just want you to know that we are addressing affordable housing and climate at the city council level, and as always, welcome your comments, ideas, and feedback. And I just want to give a big shout out to ANCA. I am so amazed by the transformative work that ANCA has done in our community, like really getting people to understand the urgency of climate change and the need to do something about it. So Linda and ANCA and everyone here, thank you so much.
button on this. Is it on? No? I don't think that's gonna work, okay. I will put it over here. See if you can get it. You got it right away. Glasses would help. Thank you. All right, so we want to give you ample time tonight to ask questions. This is such an important topic, and it's kind of new thinking, right? Yeah. And so, who would like to ask the first question? Yes, sir. Say your name and ask your question.
Yeah, my name is Eric Kimmery. I've got a whole lot of questions here as I was speaking to Bobby ahead of time.
So let me just say one thing, Eric, if you can ask like one question.
Okay.
One thing, and then we'll go to another question, and we'll come back to you.
To
okay?
address the last portion that you had up there, if the housing that you just proposed, the 3 locations, if they're not affordable housing, then everything you presented really is smoke and mirrors, because you're not stopping any footprint. You're going to have more cars, more driving, which is the worst area of the city to have it. And all you're going to do is have the people access the one area, the freeway you don't want them to access. And they're going to go down the freeway towards LA like everybody else. And if it's going to be, I don't know, it doesn't seem presentable. Now, if it's affordable, then yeah, they can work in the area. If it's not affordable, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Sure. So I think the concept of the transit villages and living close to retail, close to restaurants, is that even if you do have to get in your car and drive to work, you'll be walking maybe to the grocery store. You'll be walking to buy something at a retail store, right? And so it will, in theory, regardless of market rate or affordable housing, it will still reduce the vehicle miles traveled of people who live really close to these amenities. And that's really the goal of this housing.
And I would agree with you on that, but then I would put it down by, I've only been here a year and a half, put it down there by Burlington Northern, where you could use it to boost the area and then get on in Alabama where there's less traffic and stuff,
There's a lot of apartments, as you might have seen, being built in that donut hole area over by Citrus Plaza. But these transit villages are specifically built near the rail stations. So in theory, people can hop on the train and go to work. That's the whole point.
But nobody uses a train.
That's not true.
And that's kind of why we're doing this tonight. So that was good getting the conversation started.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
I watch that train every day, and there isn't 5 people on it. And I'm not trying to argue with you, I'm just being honest.
No, but there are some of us who take the train all the way.
I gotta take the train home.
And
Okay.
let me make one point about this. What matters is not that a given amount of emissions in any sort of new building is as low as possible. Obviously, we have to get to 0. But in the meantime, what we care about is the amount of per capita emissions compared to the marginal replacement unit. So what does that mean? If let's say we say no to any random housing development somewhere in Redlands. Let's say we're talking about a set of apartments that are outside all transit villages, where it's not going to be as good as inside. Well, what would happen then is that the amount of housing supply in our region would be less. And as anyone here who pays rent knows, we are supply constrained in our region. And so what would happen then is that if, let's say, you block housing for 200 people, well, that's 200 people that won't be able to live, not just in Redlands, but in California. And in other states, emissions are much higher because other states don't have as much environmental regulations and energy efficiency policies, and they also don't have our perfect weather. So they have to consume more energy for heating and air conditioning. And so when we're evaluating whether or not we should have more housing here or there, The key is that we have to think globally. To know that perfect is the enemy of the good, and ask ourselves, what will actually happen if we do nothing? Because the status quo is not working.
Thank you, Bobby. All right, lady in the back, say your name.
Might relate to this gentleman, my question. Okay, you mentioned the arrow that that's not being used, and without sounding like a naysayer from the city council, that was the biggest disappointment for me, was the arrow train, because I bought a house in the historic district specifically because I thought I was going to be able to get on that train and go to Union Station, and I still have my place down there and my kids. It is so awkward to use the arrow and go to San Clemente or to go to LA, because you have to change at D, which is not a great area. I'm pretty, brave. I've been in places all over the world, but a lot of people from Redlands are not going to change at that area. I don't even think there's a bench, and it's very awkward. You have to walk like a big U to get from the one train to the other. And there's, because I researched the schedule, there's between a 10 and 29 minute delay, transfer time. So is anything being done to do that? There's the two trains. The one leaves, now it's going to leave at 5:33, it leaves at 5:55. And I had to go to LA because I still go to doctors at Cedars. So I have to go that early, and then if I want to go direct, and then, I get to LA at 7 o'clock, and then you have a lot of time. And then the train coming back is effective. But you have the one that goes to Los Angeles, so that that gentleman will send people and work and go to LA if they need to. So is there anything being done about that? Because that is so awkward, and I'm a public transport user.
That's a great question, and I think a lot of people share that concern. I have not heard of anything being done to address that, although our Mayor Pro Tem Paul Barrich is a city rep on SBCTA, so he sits on the training board. But again, as it relates to the comments before, I think that if there were a lot more ridership, that might promote some changes, but I think that they have less incentive to make changes now when they're not seeing the ridership numbers that they were anticipating.
But I use the train, like I went to San Clemente on the weekend, but I drive to San Bernardino because it's much more complicated to take the arrow.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't go to the depot.
I agree with you, it's definitely not as ideal as it could be.
Is that something that can be worked on?
Potentially, you should.
Brianna, Brian, jump
Dr.
in.
Mariani. So hi, my name is Brianna. I'm here tabling on behalf of a group called Californians for Electric Rail. We have advocates here in the Inland Empire as well as in the Los Angeles area and up and down the state. But specifically, we have a campaign that we're working on to push Metrolink to electrify their trains. And electrification is the gold standard for public transit and regional rail transit around the world. And so we have a petition here that you can visit my booth afterwards, sign the petition, add your name to the list. We really want to show, like SBCTA and Metrolink, that electrification is the ideal for the San Bernardino line. And what that would do is it would offer more reliable service, more frequent trains, faster transfer times, as well as zero emission service. So no more diesel polluting trains on line. So
We need that.
Thank
That's
you.
That's great. Thank you.
Someone else. Greg.
Yeah, just one quick announcement. First, the university is just about ready for its ribbon cutting next week, or I'm sorry, next month. That will kind of open up then the walkway out of that to allow more access into the campus. But I think we're right at the very beginning of the transit-oriented development, and the plans are very ambitious. And I think other places have seen substantial commercial, government, residential investments, and so that will drive up traffic, will cause a lot of problems, and that will be a little bit. But I want to get to a little bit more of the point though that both Bobby and Denise brought to. So I think from a zoning standpoint, you both drilled it. Like there's a lot of literature in the case study, right? Here's like 1906, San Francisco was just terrible in terms of its city development. Massive earthquake, fire destroys 28,000. They get to start from, it's Bobby, your dream. You get to start from scratch and redesign the city, and they did it so much more efficiently. And so urban planners have been studying that for years. But by the way, those plans were ready for when that happened. The problem now is what do we do when we've got a region that was developed terribly? Like almost the worst thing you could envision with sprawl defining it, poor land use policy. And I just want to, so I'm just going to give you a slight pushback, Bobby, but in a gentle and nice way. That will it, like, in other words, the model here, right, is like to still have beautiful green spaces and parks. You don't want to like have 10 times the density and Redlands have 750,000 people. You want to have it condensed into a spot with beautiful green spaces and walkable places, the pictures that you're showing us. But those are all privately owned, and if we just do like, yes, in my backyard, do we get the design that we need from the city without a massive, horrific earthquake and corresponding fire? Not that we're rooting for that, but to see what I'm saying. And so is that the solution, or does it take even more city council advancement to try and incentivize and create those zones that we eventually want to be green and the density more to be over here and related to transit?
Great question. So there's a way to accomplish it. And that is to make sure that we're not just building more housing, but are also building more transit. And the reason why is because so much of our land is used by cars. When you combine both roads and parking lots, around half, if not more, that our city's land is covered in asphalt. So if we want, and we need, more density, more housing, but we also want to have a lot of green space and trees, then we need to really double down on more transit, more buses, more trains, better walkable neighborhoods so we can reduce car dependence and ultimately reduce the amount of land that is consumed by cars. That's how we can have both.
And again, there's somebody over here, Levine.
I'm torn between, I didn't see any parks mentioned when you addressed that, but my main concern is I just got the fire report, only 51% contained with, I was told that the reason my fence can only be 6 foot high is so fire can get over it. And that the reason why I have to have that amount of space between my house and the neighbor's house is for fire.
And before you jump in, I just wanted to address the park question. I totally agree with you. Green space is vital to our health and well-being and the health of the environment. We have hired another consultant. Right now, the city's in the process of revising and creating actually a parks master plan. And so stay tuned for more updates on that. That'll be, I think, a great benefit because we have parks, we have great parks, but they can certainly be better. And I'm hoping that it helps the city do some mapping for some further green space as well.
And to address the question on fires, so I almost included it. In hindsight, I should have. When we were talking about how limiting infill drives more sprawl, that's not just true for the, that concern is not just something we should think about in terms of the environmental destruction, but it's also important for the safety of the people who would then live in those areas. Because when we make it too difficult to build housing in already urbanized areas, which are safe from wildfires, we push people out to areas where they have to live on what we call the urban wildlife interface. So that's basically like, you know, your house is right next to the forest. And that's where people are most unsafe when a wildfire occurs. I'm sure all of us know some people who live in places like Big Bear, Arrowhead Springs, and even parts of the Highland that where they would have rather had been, you know, closer to the center of the region, but got pushed out because of the cost of housing. And as far as the land use restrictions and that being partly motivated by fire safety, that actually is true, but a lot of that is outdated. A lot of that actually came following the San Francisco earthquake, where we learned a lot about the flaws in how buildings were built in the 19th century. And so they made a whole lot of new building code changes for the 20th century. But now those are out of date. So we actually have a lot of opportunities to update them for the 21st century, where we can actually use the space much more efficiently, not have to spread everybody out as much, and still have just as much or even better fire safety than we did before.
Hi, my name is Michelle. We are relatively recent transplants from the city of Chicago, so we
A
kind
little bit
of
louder, Michelle.
transplants from the city of Chicago, so we kind of have a different perspective here, and I'm feeling very conflicted. And I would like to know your thoughts on just kind of the inherent difficulties that do come with public transit and safety and quality of life when you start getting the high density people on top of each other and also the public transit. We lived there 30 years downtown and went from transiting everywhere to eventually refusing to touch it because it became so dangerous. Our adult daughters don't even have driver's license because they didn't need them. So I don't know, I mean, probably in this area it's not the same thing now, but I'm seeing what's happening to the LA bus drivers right now. So what are your thoughts on just kind of the inherent problems that do come when you transition to this type of living situation?
So those are like really important problems, and it is, you highlight something so important there. People have to feel safe on transit to use it. And that's something we probably don't do well enough in California, but certainly it is getting more attention, and I hope it will improve. But to answer your question, it's not actually driven by density. That is something that becomes more visible when you have higher density, but it's not caused by density. For example, if you were to look at crime rates in all the big cities in the U.S., the lowest one, the safest one, is actually New York. And likewise, if you zoom out even more and look internationally, you see the same thing. There's no connection between density and safety or crime rates. But nevertheless, getting people to embrace public transit, you need to achieve safety for that to happen, to make density more livable. But it's not caused by density.
I agree. I think we have time for maybe two more questions. Can somebody who hasn't asked one? Go ahead.
Yeah, great presentation. Everything looks really cool, all the plans and new stuff. I'm wondering, what is a transit village? So is that just like a localization of like a city, like an actual place where people? What does it mean?
Sure. So it's intentional development within a mile of a train station, right? And there's actually a state bill at this point. I'm surprised Bobby didn't talk about this, since we love to talk about parking minimums. So the state of California is really prioritizing these transit village concepts, right? Because they want people to be using cars less and walking more, and so there's no minimum parking requirement for these developments. So it makes it more appealing for developers, and it encourages people to not have quite so many cars and to walk more. But our concepts are really centered around mixed use, housing, retail, walkability.
So what are the other ones in the area? Because like the only dense place I can think of would be Riverside.
Mm-hmm.
Where, like other than Redlands, what will be the closest one?
Claremont.
Claremont.
Oh yeah,
Claremont, maybe think about it.
They are a great example. I think they're doing it really well in Claremont. Access to a train station, walkable downtown, housing near the downtown. It's a great example.
Thank you. One more question.
On the topic of
A little louder, please.
sorry, I think on this topic of sustainable living, and one of the things you touched on was, the economic factor and these livable communities where people can go to work and also, do their daily things without having to use cars. What is like an example or consensus of thinking on how we can draw more businesses into the city? Because I think that's that's a major factor. If you look at, as you're reading the University of Redlands, some of those things that are one of our bigger employer factors. Otherwise, a lot of people go towards Los Angeles for work. So how can we, is there any examples of how we can get businesses to come to our city to employ more people and have jobs for those that live here?
That's a great question. And I think that it's really, it's twofold, right? We just hired a new economic development manager. I'm not sure what his title is, but someone whose job is specifically that, right? To recruit new businesses. And so I think that's important, right? We need someone to go out and be recruiting businesses intentionally to come to Redlands. But the other piece of that too is we need better policies. Like I've heard from a number of people who have tried to start businesses here that it's more difficult here than it is in some of the other surrounding cities. And so we are actively looking at that to see how we can make it easier and more attractive for people to start businesses here. But hopefully this new person will help us in that journey. That's a great concern.
And if I can answer that question from a more general point. So all the things we've talked about here actually help businesses too. We were focused on the residential side, on housing, but all those things actually apply to commercial developments as well. So when we allow higher densities, we could do it for residential, you can do it for commercial properties too, and that will actually reduce the cost to start a business because you won't need as much land. You won't necessarily need to have an excess amount of parking. You have more naturally affordable building types and so on. And then, when you get density, you drive the cycle of what economists call agglomeration. The more businesses and people that are in the same area, the more vibrancy you get, because every business has within a certain amount of distance, there's more customers, more employees, and actually more competition, which might not sound good for a business, but in the long run, it is shown that it is.
Thank you. Let's give our speakers. I just want to express appreciation for the very thoughtful, serious questions that were raised tonight. These are all pieces of things that we need to look at and take into consideration as we begin to build new models of community for the future. I wish I could pop up that vision chart again because that kind of gets at some of these things like localized businesses. We have to localize businesses because we're not going to be able to drive the distances we drive now to go to work. And the global supply chains are not going to be as strong as they have been. And so there's so many changes that have to happen at every level. I'm really delighted to see some younger people here tonight. It's great to have you here because you guys need to be involved in this conversation. I'm going to give you another chance to talk to somebody else in this room that you don't know, and I want you to just share one thing that struck you about this presentation and also the Q&A conversation we've had. Again, take just 30 minutes each, and then I have a few announcements, and then we'll have some time again to talk one-on-one with the speakers. Okay? So, 30 seconds. that you are taking away tonight. Everybody hear that? A new idea, a new understanding, a new perspective maybe that you're taking away tonight. What would that be for you? Okay, just that density would make a difference, yeah. It's a good starting point. Another one. Living what do you do with your dog? Okay, so we're going to be pondering what you do about your dog, okay? Anyone else have something? Greg?
Bobby's design for transit-oriented development does have a lot of mixed use that is higher density, and maybe that could alleviate some of the problems that people are experiencing, frustrations of too long a time between trains or transfer points. As that volume builds up, if we're patient and get this development going and successful, it could be like win-win across that and actually being able to test out Bobby's hypothesis.
Anna, one more?
Yeah, I would like the city to consider that with all that density, we're going to have to change our policies on waste. Because our city is horrible at recycling and using styrofoam, which feels like it's from that.
That's right. Everything is related. Yes.
We're talking about it.
Okay. Yeah, we are. Yeah, everything is related. And by the way, we're working on this at the neighborhood level, all of this stuff too. And that's really kind of where it starts because we're talking about a lot of behavior changes, aren't we? And that's hard, right? But it's what's at stake is our future. So we've got to see. In fact, there was a great quote from the LA Times that I just happen to have with me. Earth is in peril. Will we sacrifice enough today to ensure future generations can survive? Because I think sometimes this sounds like sacrificing. However, as Bobby beautifully articulated and that our vision for a climate resilient community, I think we can build a better community if we can really work together. All the issues you raised were helpful. They need to be part of the conversation. We all need to talk together about it. So with that, I want to share some things that are coming up in ANCA, but before I forget, I just want to give a shout out to Hillary Jenkins, sitting here on the end. She's a climate scientist at the university professor, and she also is running for the San Bernardino Valley Water District. I got that right, finally. Yes, so and her little flyers over there, often when I get ballots, when it comes to positions like that, I don't know anybody who's running. So now you know Hillary, and she's a really good person, so please vote for her. I guess Jenna left, but it was so good having two council women here, right? All right, so I want to go over a little bit of what is coming up with ANCA. So this is a program that we are very, very excited about. It's called Map Your Neighborhood. This is a way that we are starting out to work at the neighborhood level. And this program considers a neighborhood 15 to 20 households. You get a picture of that in your neighborhood. The focus of this program is disaster readiness. And after the couple weeks that we've had, I think we might be ready for this, right? Yeah, and it's such a simple program. Some brave person in a neighborhood decides, I want to be a host in my neighborhood for this program. And they let us know that. And we go and we meet with them. And it's a 30-minute meeting, and we help them to set the boundaries of their neighborhood and to set a date for it. And usually it's just a couple weeks out from that, because it doesn't take a lot of organizing. You just have to go and knock on 15 to 20 doors, and we really encourage it has to be in person, and invite them to come to your living room or possibly your backyard or whatever for a 1.5-hour presentation where they will learn, you will learn what you need to do in the first hour to save lives, protect property, and to minimize injuries, and then you build a little plan for your neighborhood. And it's really great. You leave feeling like empowered that you would kind of know what to do if we had a major earthquake And who knows, scientists say we can't even imagine the kinds of disasters that are coming. Not to scare you or anything, but I do think about that. There are strange things happening. So we need to start preparing. And so this is a first step, I think, on doing that, okay? And then we get to know our neighbors, which, as Bobby pointed out, building community is so important. Okay, now Anna, did I leave anything out?
No, so that, I'll be over here and afterward if you want to walk in.
Yes.
And sign up to be a host or facilitator.
Yes, yes, we also need people who will do that present that 1.5 hour program. It's really easy. All right, next slide. I've got 2 things to hold on here. Okay, oh, we have that one. Okay, Repair Cafe. How many of you have heard of a Repair Cafe? Well, a lot of you have. There's another one. We did the first one on Earth Day, second one coming up on October 5th. So what you can do is, what the idea is that you bring broken stuff that you usually there's not a way to get things repaired these days, right? It's really hard to find somebody. We have incredible fixers. I think we have more than 10 now, who can fix almost anything you can think of. There's a list there. Oh no, I think there's a flyer there. And on the flyer is a place where you can actually go online and you can tell what your thing is that you want fixed. And the fixers will look at that and they will make sure to have the right tools there that day. So it's really a cool concept. It will help us not throw so much stuff into the landfills and get used to the whole concept of repairing things, right? Reusing things. So that is coming up on October 5th right here.
What's the price, Linda?
Pardon me?
What's the price?
The price, oh, didn't I mention that? It's free. It's free. So please, take a flyer, tell your friends and neighbors. And, oh, I'm going the wrong way again. Okay. And then next week, I'm sure Jenna had to leave, but there's going to be a city council candidates forum on climate change. I was so thrilled that both Denise and Jenna are here because it's so important for our political leaders to be in on these conversations, right? And so we want to know where they're coming from on climate change. So this will be in this room, September 25th, 6 to 7:30, and it will we'll have Jenna will be here, Eddie Tejeda, and Jennifer Marvias. We hope a couple of others will come, but we haven't heard from them yet. Okay, and then let's see, right, another one. Right, and then I didn't have time to put this really together, but I just want to give you the message: don't send your ballot in before October 13th, okay? Because on that date, our event here, we call these our monthlies, is going to be dedicated to understanding what's at stake for the planet in the upcoming election, okay? And also more about the climate action plan. So you can register an event, right? And I think there's a place here to sign up tonight. And let's see if there's anything else. I think that was the last one. Oh, is that for real, Aaron?
So some people wanted to ride the train, so we're going to ride the train.
Okay.
It's going to be a lot of fun. You know, we can address how to navigate that transfer, and we can chat, and then we can have fun in Claremont, and we're going to have a great time. So we're going to leave from University Station. We're going to go to downtown Claremont. We're going to come back. We'll be done by 1 p.m. You'll get more like info from ANCA about it. But yeah, save the date.
Thank you, Aaron. I think that's exciting. I know I'm going to go. Okay, 2 more quick things. I just want to let you know that we are a nonprofit organization. That means you can give donations without a tax exempt. And we are at a critical juncture with ANCA. We've been all volunteer up to this point, except for Nancy Gould sitting here, who was our part-time bookkeeper. And so we are at a point that we really need to staff up and we need to raise money. So if you are so inclined, we will be very grateful. And we also need more volunteers. We are growing and we have so many programs going now, we could use your help. So let us know, talk to me after if you're interested in volunteering. Excuse me. And then, sorry, my voice is going. You have an evaluation form. Could you please take a couple minutes to fill that out? everybody? And then hand it to Anna at the door as you leave. Everybody got one of these? Oh, you need one? Yep. Anybody else? Oh. So when you finish your evaluation, you could give it to Anna standing at the door, and then please stay around, get to know people, talk to the people at the tables here, find out more about what's going on in your community. Thank you all for coming.